Every child matters, and every life that we save or change matters. And I think that is the important thing in the end. And even if you say it's a drop in the ocean, yeah, but still it makes a difference. We need the best people who can really work efficiently and with little time have the maximum of output.
Well, what a different episode this is going to be as I talk with Adrian Förster. He's the CEO of Save the Children Switzerland. Now, I had the opportunity of meeting Adrian because we're doing a live music and fundraising event right here in Zurich on December 11th. And I think this is also a good opportunity to talk about the world of work of NGOs and of Save the Children, not only because I'm genuinely interested to learn a little bit more about that, but also because this podcast is about showcasing different professions, different needs, different paths. And I am a firm believer that the future world of work is all about how we can be creative in designing different paths, different careers for ourselves that will change in time, depending on where we are, what we want, and which direction we want to go. But anyway, enough of that for now. Let's tune into the conversation with Adrian, get to hear more about his story and about Save the Children.
Thank you very much, Paola. Yeah, it is a privilege to be working for an NGO. And probably it's the fact that I'm ended up in an NGO is sort of basically rooted probably in my personal story, that I grew up in South America and saw the differences between rich and poor, and played as a privileged kid of an expat in the favelas with the children of poor people who are at a disadvantage. And that sort of probably was very much ingrained in me. And at the age of 20, I took this decision that I really want to commit my life to the cause of other people who are not as privileged as I am, and decided not to pursue my legal career also that I could have. And so basically I ended up in development work from the very beginning after my studies. Yes.
And so it was a natural, it sounds like it came as a very natural type of decision, but how challenging was it nonetheless for you in terms of saying, because it is for most of us, when we leave university, say, okay, which direction to go or not to go, where to experiment, explore. Was it for you like an obvious thing, or you wanted to try something else out before you actually jumped into the world of the NGOs?
It was a very conscious decision, and it was a very challenging one. I studied law, but I never worked one day as in the legal profession. I worked for 3 years for an insurance company doing all kind of management stuff. And the moment I left for my further studies in Great Britain and then to Africa for 10 years, I knew that it is sort of what I'm doing now is career suicide, where I just realized if I now leave, become an NGO worker somewhere in Africa, will never try to go back to the legal career, So I just knew this is going to be decisive for me. But I was so convinced that this is the right thing to do. And it was one of those convictions that I kept for the whole time up to now. And it is sort of a different type of career, if you want to say so. And it's not a career that is based on, high prestige and high status and high income, but it's maybe a career that is maybe rewarded with a sense of purpose or a sense of doing the right thing. And also a lot of, encounters with people and with cultures and circumstances that are very enriching. So in a way, you're rewarded in a different way. And I never regretted it. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. And actually, I smiled when you said career suicide, because and I'm glad you repositioned that, because it's a different type of career, but it is nonetheless, you're spending your time, you're spending, and you're putting your life to a great extent, to work for others. And I firmly believe that it is a different way of just packaging, your values, your beliefs, who you are, your qualifications in a direction that really speaks to you and that's very rewarding to you, besides the monetary aspect. But I think there are many people out there, it's not only they don't do careers just for money. For many, it's the sense of purpose as well, right? But I do think the NGO environment is, at least for me, I think, having a little bit more of your sense, help us understand what it's like to work in an NGO in general, and then of course specifically Save the Children, because again, coming from corporate, that's my background. I have a very different vision of the world of work with a very clear business model, even though the different businesses and industries. But let's say the dynamics of it are pretty straightforward when you talk about business. Help me understand, what's your business like? Because it's still a business, but it's a very different one.
What is our business like? I mean, yeah, in the end, it is all about, the impact we can make. So I think that is the thing that we have to have an eye on. How much can we really make a difference with what we do? I think that is the main thing. It's not about, income and profit, but it's about impact and how to communicate that. So that is maybe one of the big challenges in our sector is not, what do we do with our money? There is always enough need in the world, but how do we communicate what we are doing? We have a compelling vision, and we want to invite people to be part of that and join our vision and be part of that difference that we make. But we have to translate the situation of those children in those countries to the people here in Switzerland and explain to them what it means to be in those situations out there. Then, of course, also explain what is our role in it, what is our added value as an NGO, because we develop worldwide common approaches of best practice. We bring expertise to the field, into the project development. We have all those safeguarding and fraud protection systems in place. We audit the project and bring back reports, and all this has to be communicated to people to understand why is the NGO here in Switzerland so important. And sometimes individual donors think it's easy to implement a project in Africa nowadays with globalization, communication, and traveling is so easy. So they start implementing project themselves and think they can save costs and be more efficient. And most of them realize at some point how complex this business is, how complex implementation of project is, because it's not about, just finding a technical solution for safe drinking water, for example, but it's about behavioral change. It's about, the cultural perspective of disease, for example. And so it's not as easy. And some of them then realize that if they try to implement it themselves, they either don't have the same impact or they would even have higher costs than if they would work through us. So this whole communication aspect is a big part of our business, if you want. Yes.
Right. Yeah. And that's fascinating. Also what you were mentioning, because I do sense, and it's just an intuition, that more and more people are interested in that area, in that space of the NGOs. And there is a perception that it may be a relatively, not easy, but let's say if there's a need, you have the resources, that I'll just go and kind of do it. My perception has also been that there are so many players as well, nonetheless, in a certain territory, even in a territory of need, that sometimes I wonder, how is that collaboration as well happening on the ground to make sure that, and I'm talking about years ago, I had met somebody who was working in NGOs probably 20 years ago. And he was saying one of the challenges is also logistically, in terms of not only how to get the projects working in certain countries where you're targeting the projects or where the projects are needed, but also because there are other players there, maybe even other NGOs that may be operating in similar areas, fields, etc. Tell, if it's possible, to maybe shed some light a bit on how that ecosystem is orchestrated, while each one maintaining your own independence, if you see my point.
Yeah, I think we would be surprised if we saw how well NGOs cooperate on the ground, because they're much closer to the beneficiaries, to the children, and they're much more aware what is really important. And there is a growing number of NGOs, that is true, but I think it's a positive aspect, because it shows that in those countries, civil society is getting active and is trying to change situations that maybe the government doesn't take care of, and so they take it into their own hands. And those local NGOs particularly, they're very much self-governed by local people, and they're great actors to cooperate with. And so we welcome that, and there is regular meetings on the ground for different clusters, we call it, for different sectors, like the drinking water sector, the education sector, or the humanitarian sector. There is regular meetings of coordination, and there's a lot of collaboration as well, particularly in humanitarian crises as well, where very informally NGOs cooperate. So it's not perceived as a competition on the ground. If you want, theoretically, there's a competition in the fundraising market in the north, of course, in the global north. And then at the same time, if you see how small the whole sector is compared to the rest of the economy, we're not really in competition. So there's still enough resources there as well. And even in, you wouldn't believe it, but even in fundraising, we cooperate quite a lot.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yep. I mean, I do think that's fantastic to really see it as a collaborative network, even of similar players, but it is within collaboration as opposed to a competition, you know, although, grants and maybe fundraising, that could be a little bit more, as you were saying, maybe a little bit more complex, but it sounds to me that it's still, there's quite a bit of cooperation happening there too.
Absolutely. A good example is institutional donors. You know, when big institutional donors put out a grant and we see, well, alone this chunk is too big, this project that they want to see implemented is too big, so we build a consortium together with others and then together submit the proposal. So in that sense also, it is interesting to collaborate with others, and use each other's strength and expertise and complement each other.
Right. And you were mentioning before that, if you look at the economics of it, if you don't mind, I just pivot quickly to that point, because then, of course, it triggered my curiosity. It's probably a drop in the ocean, of course, compared to the bigger economic sectors that we're talking about. But give us a sense, first of all, Save the Children. I think, it is, when I was researching it years ago, when I first started, let's say, donating to the UK, like we were talking about earlier today. I mean, it's one of the oldest as well organizations. It was, I think, founded in 1919, all the way back then in the UK. But so maybe give us a little bit of a sense of Save the Children, etc., and the number part as well. Like, so it helps us put into perspective this world of work. What are the perimeters?
Yes. Yeah, you researched well. We were founded in 1919 after the First World War, when our founder, Eglantine Jepp from the UK, saw the need of children in post-World War I Germany and started supporting these children. She was also the one who drafted the first Child Rights Charter. And the Child Rights Charter for Children from the UN is based on Save the Children's first draft. And the UN Child Rights Convention is based on the work of Eglantine Jepp. And today, we are globally a well-coordinated, federated network of 30 independent members. And we have a common ambition that every child survives, learns, and is protected. We are present in 122 countries with all those development projects on education and health and nutrition. And Save the Children Switzerland was only founded 15 years ago and supports 40 projects all over the globe. And our strengths and our specialities from a technical perspective is migration, children in slums, and children in emergencies. That's sort of where we sort of contribute to the wider network with our expertise.
Wow. Okay. So 15 years in Switzerland, and we were talking a bit earlier that perhaps not many people know Save the Children as well as maybe some other NGOs, but 15 years, it's already, it's quite some time on the territory.
It is quite young for a Swiss NGO. If you see other NGOs who have been there for a lot longer and are much better known, but I think we have a really good cause, and we were able to really mobilize people in Switzerland to support us, and we have a growing base of supporters because they see how much impact we have. And so we are now at the office in Zurich. We have 50 staff working for those projects and with those donors, and we keep growing. Yes.
Well, that's good. That's good. And you're involved in 40 projects, you say, as
40 projects
Save the
that
Children,
we sort of, support
Switzerland.
directly, but then in many others we would just give our expertise, because in that network of Save the Children, we're very collaborative. We have calls all the time. If you need any kind of resources, people help each other. We have direct access to we have 50 country offices worldwide, and we can directly contact them, ask them questions. They can ask our experts questions. We can call also the center in the UK, where they have a technical center, and get support from that side. So it's very collaborative, and that makes it very interesting as well, and very effective.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds like the culture is very particular in Save the Children, is it? Like,
yes, it is. It is a cool thing. Just to give you an example, any other Save the Children member creates a nice video for marketing or whatever purposes. We can just take it from their website without even asking a question. The culture is copy with pride. So all the material that we create is always available for anybody within the network. And that makes it very efficient. We don't even have to ask questions. Right now, today, we had a press release on 100 days change of regime in Afghanistan. We just copied from the German website and use it and publish it on our website, and everybody's fine with that. And they do the same on our website, yes.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay. And do you guys have like global meetings or virtual meetings where the heads of the different Save the Children entities come together, and you kind of I don't know, I keep thinking of business like your 3-year plan, or, how you're allocating the funds and what's the best way of
Yes, we meet once a year as members together for a longer gathering. This is the members meeting, where we also, according to our bylaws, have votes on the strategy and on the targets that we aim at. And we have now one strategy for the next 3 years that is coordinated, and there is one, what they call global funding framework, where we make sure that the contributions we receive, the targeted contributions, are also really according to the needs in the different countries, that matches well. So we have a common strategy, we have common targets, we have a global funding framework. Of course, there's a lot of coordination that still has to be done, and there's some challenges with just getting everybody on the same page. But in general, there is a huge amount of coordination and collaboration going on, and we meet once a year. But then also there's, of course, the global program directors would have regular calls. Nowadays with COVID, it's all virtual. The fundraising directors have regular calls. The HR directors have regular calls to just exchange and see how we can develop and share our insights and our resources.
Right. And going back to the economics of it, we kind of started from there in terms of like it is a drop in the ocean. And if it's okay to sort of get that sense of, when we're talking about the fundraising, for example, or the type of resources that you are able to mobilize through the grants or fundraising efforts or etc. Give us a ballpark figure of what are we talking about here in terms of the numbers, if that's okay with you.
For Switzerland or for the whole network?
Whatever whatever works best for you. For the whole network, I think would be an interesting one. And then if you want to zoom in on Switzerland, absolutely.
For the whole network, we talk. I would have to look up the figures for the beneficiaries, but I think it was like 40 million children worldwide in some way benefit from our work. We raise globally about $2.4 billion US. But I have to say there's a lot that also goes into some of the largest members like the US into their local market. They have own domestic programs. Same for us. We have a domestic program as well in Switzerland for children in the asylum sector. Part of our income goes to that. So it's not all on the international level, but some members have quite large domestic programs as well. And in Switzerland, we raise about 25 million Swiss francs a year.
25 million.
Yes. Yes.
Is that what is your judgment on that? Is that?
I think it's not as important how we value that, because it's all very relative. I worked before for an NGO that was much, much, much smaller, And we always felt like, wow, we're so small, what can we do? And then there was other NGOs that were even 10 times smaller than that one. And they looked up to that one and said, wow, you're so big. And so I think the thing is, what can we do for children? And I think every child matters, and every life that we save or change matters. And I think that is the important thing in the end. And even if you say it's a drop in the ocean, yeah, but still it makes a difference. For those children that we help, it makes a difference. And I think that is what keeps us going. And of course, there's a lot that we cannot do, but we look at what we can do.
Fantastic. So tell me, what does it take to work for an NGO and be successful at Save the Children? What type of talent typically would you be looking for? I can imagine you have to be internally very driven and motivated and make a difference, and it's drop by drop, bit by bit, child by child type of thing, where you can make an impact. But give me a sense of, if you were to hire your top talents, what would that person be like?
Yeah, that it's very different. Depends on which department. I think in general, what is underestimated is the high skills that we require. People think, oh, it's working for an NGO. The money comes in anyway. They don't have to work for that. And they just don't realize that we have to be extremely efficient with our gifts, because we want to make sure that as much as possible goes to children. And so we need the best people who can really work efficiently and with little time have the maximum of output. And that's what people don't realize, that we need people with high skills. And that is sometimes very hard to recruit, people who are really well qualified and then are willing to work for a salary that is considerably lower than in the market. Depending on the department, you would have people coming from other companies. Like in fundraising, you need fundraising specialists that may come from the NGO sector, but may also come from outside. Whereas in the global programs department, where it's about managing those grants and those projects, we very often have students straight from their master's degrees coming as an intern, and then maybe become an account manager, or then even a team leader, who do their career internally with us straight from their studies. Because that is something you can't really learn elsewhere. The managing of a development program, no other company sort of does that in the way we do it.
So how do you do it? I'm very curious now. You triggered my curiosity on the development projects. What do they learn?
Yeah, we often send our staff that manages program to do further studies at the Technical University of Zurich. There's a program called Development Cooperation program that you can do. And it's a lot about how do you program in those societies. It's about culture. It's about, there's an approach, a technical approach, also how you build up such a program so that it makes sense, that it's logic in itself, that you have the right monitoring schemes set in place, the right key performance indicators, that kind of thing. And it's very complex. And so you can do a master's degree at the Technical University of Zurich, but most students come with a different degree and then they go for further training there.
Okay. And then what type of experience would they get on the ground? And for example, if they join you, they would be running a development project.
I mean, the projects are always run by the local people in the country offices. They are sort of the head of programs. And from our side, it would be the input and advice. And of course, by asking questions, we also trigger questions on their side and reflections. So it's like a negotiating together and thinking through those programs and how they make sense from the theoretical side, maybe, but also from the practical side. Yeah, what shall I say?
And let's say, so if I understood correctly, let's say the org design, well, I'm using a technical word here, of your structure, it seems I've understood you have a fundraising component where there are very specific skills that you're looking for as well. And then you have the projects component, probably a G&A, let's say a office type of management. What are the departments, let's say, the functions that you would typically have in your structure?
Yes, you mentioned the two largest ones. It's the fundraising, marketing, public relations department. We have the global programs, and within the global programs, of course, the national programs that we do in Switzerland with the children in the asylum sector. Then we have a small HR department, and the finance and admin also is a smaller department. And then, of course, the people who do the national programs, they're an own department as well, if you want. Yeah, that's about our structure. And then we make sure that people who are in touch with programs, they also get regularly to go to the field. And it's one of the things that we do for the development of these staff. Some of them we encourage to really go for a while into the field. We second them to other members of the international network so they get a certain field experience. Because on the long run, if you want to do a career in the NGO, in the programs part, you need field experience.
Oh, of course. And let's talk about that a second. Careers in the NGOs. What would a path look like to get to your role, for example, or to get to a role of significant responsibility and accountability, which equals usually leverage, a higher leverage, right, in advocating, in advocacy, or also like in very concrete development projects that have an important impact. What would it take? What does it take to build that career? What type of steps do you think?
It's very funny how different the careers are of my fellow CEOs here in Switzerland when I talk to them. Some of them come really from marketing or even finance, but quite a few also come from the programmatic side who have really been in the field, to the field for a longer time. I mean, if you always work in fundraising, you don't necessarily need to have been somewhere out there for a longer time, but it's always good to understand what is happening in those countries and how children are. But it's not necessarily that you have to have worked abroad for a longer time. Whereas if you're in programs, I think it makes a huge difference whether you really know what your fellows from the country offices talk about, what their constraints are, what their challenges are, how the cultures sort of work differently. It is a huge advantage. And our global programs director, he has worked many years in different countries, and that is certainly an advantage. And what comes with it is also a certain network within those country offices. If you have been longer in the sector, you know a lot of people, and that gives you good contacts and connections, and that is important as well.
I would imagine, right? Like your line of business is very much on, like we were mentioning earlier, like on relationships, on the network, on the connections. I mean, as much as we're talking many industries, automation, digitalization, innovation, are all very important things in terms of making our work more efficient to a great extent. But in certain industries, it's wiping out jobs literally as well. I would imagine that, you know, within humanitarian related sectors, the human component is still probably the number one component to make things happen. I mean,
it always is the people who make the difference, as in any organization. If you have great people, and we have great people, it is a lot of fun to work with, and you really see things moving forward. And at the same time, technology has become more and more important. We are making ourselves huge steps in digitalization. I mean, the whole remote work, everybody was forced to do that due to the COVID crisis. But also in other areas, we just see how we can be more efficient by going more into the digital and technology sector. And so, for example, our fundraising is changing considerably. Our digital fundraising is increasing enormously. We're one of the number one organizations in Switzerland and worldwide in digital fundraising, whereas the traditional fundraising with the payment slips, as we like it a lot in Switzerland, it will still be there for another 10, 20 years, but it is on the decrease. So we have to change on that. And there, of course, technology will play a much more important role than it used to.
Well, here we are. That's the end of part one of my conversation with Adrian Förster, CEO of Save the Children Switzerland. Make sure you tune into part two and you subscribe to the World of Work podcast. And by the way, if you're in Zurich, check out the live music and fundraising event we're doing on December 11th. Until the next time, as always, do take good care.